so.
Good evening, everyone. I call to order the regular meeting of the Victoria City Council for January 27th, 2020 at 6:30. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, some announcements. The Victoria Fire Relief's annual ice fishing contest will be held on February 2nd on Steiger Lake from 12:30 to 2:30. Everyone is welcome to attend. Please come on out and support our firefighters. That's always a fun event. Next, we have applications are being sought for Victoria residents interested in helping to share the future of Victoria. We have openings on our Planning Commission, Park and Rec Committee, and our new senior committee, CARES. Applications for these will close on February 21st, with interviews conducted in March for Planning Commission and Park and Rec Committee. Interviews for, interviews for our new senior committee, CARES, will be conducted in April. We're still accepting applications for Victoria's inaugural Citizens Academy, which will be held in February and runs through March. The academy is open to any adult resident in Victoria wanting to learn more about how our city government works and get behind the scenes with city staff and operations. More information can be found on the city website. Space is filling up fast. Okay, that's it for the announcements. Dana, anything else?
Nothing from staff.
Open forum. I've got 3 slips. Are there any others? If not, first up, Emily Nebben. Name and address for the record, please.
All right, so I've worked this down to 5 minutes. Took me a little while, and I'm going to stick to the script. My name is Emily Nebben, and I live at 8177 Savannah Valley Way here in Victoria. My husband and I decided to move to Victoria over 19 years ago from Bloomington, but both grew up in western Carver County. We were taken by the beauty of eastern Carver County and the smaller feel of the community and the schools. We have 2 children who currently attend District 112 schools and a Chanhassen High School graduate. As I watched the anti-District 112 campaign unfold, I was left with numerous questions. As a longtime resident, I'm not sure where this distrust of our district had come from. As I dug deeper into the anti-District 112 campaign, I was shocked at who and what I found. I will not get into who and what I found, but will focus on the questions that I have pondered. Why would our school district lie to us about the need for more space, student growth, and the need for a bus garage? What do they have to gain besides the money they need for more space, student needs, and a garage to house the extra buses they have needed to buy due to growing attendance numbers? Why were the referendum questions spun into equity spending? Equity work happens on an ongoing basis in all districts, regardless of referendum money. The referendum money was not tied to equity spending. Why are we so afraid of people who look different from us? A couple of months back, a Victoria mom mentioned a story right here at City Council about her daughter who she encouraged to befriend a Muslim girl in her class. She said that the parents said the girl could not be her daughter's friend outside of school. Now that might be true for that family, but let's realize there may be other reasons for that decision outside of being Muslim. I've been teaching in Bloomington for 19 years and have had many Muslim children in my classroom, and they have befriended many children. Most of those kids are white due to my classroom makeup. Those kids go on play dates, they attend birthday parties, hang out with white children outside of school on a regular basis. I feel that I can safely say it is not Muslim practice to not allow their children to associate with white children outside of school. Please do not be confused or filled with fear by the anti-Muslim rhetoric that's being spread by the anti-referendum groups. Every race and religion has children and parents that break the norm and behave in a way that is disturbing or unexpected. If we take a step back to look at the situation, we would realize this. What brings me here tonight is an op-ed written by Mr. Tom Funk in our local papers. His op-ed has spread around local Facebook sites since Thursday. When I read some of the comments it generated, it broke my heart and inspired me to speak up. One Victoria resident said, and I do not know her, but this is a quote, As a transracial family, 4 years into living in Victoria, I am officially starting to regret our move. I don't know where to find our village in Victoria, or if it's even possible. I hope that those who do not support Funk start to speak out, even if it's just to me personally, so I feel like we may have support here. I am here for the Katies of Victoria. I too question his motives in writing it. I question what his plan is to make our schools the best that they can be. We all know that schools need money to run. When he speaks to the rhetoric of the anti-referendum base, I wonder if he is using the momentum they have built up to benefit his run for Senate. Mr. Funk also stated that he briefly attended, and I don't know what briefly means in this context, an equity training session hosted by District 112. Here is one of his quotes. Clearly, its goal is to indoctrinate our youth about white and Christian privilege. Now, this is a general and sweeping statement made with no evidence of material covered in this meeting and how this indoctrination was to be laid out and implemented in the classrooms. As a Bloomington employee who has been through equity training sessions, many of them over the years, I have seen no evidence of indoctrination as mentioned by the anti-District 112 campaign supporters. We as teachers struggle to find the time needed for reading, writing, and math. And let's not forget about students' social emotional needs. We take for granted that all students arrive at school fed, rested, with the ability to focus and show grit and perseverance in their daily work and interactions. Well, that is not the case. Teachers take on the role of parent, nurse, psychologist, amongst other impromptu roles based on the ever-changing daily needs of their students. Children of every race, religion, and socioeconomic level have tough days at school. My point is, there is no time for indoctrination about white and Christian privilege. I am hoping that Mr. Funk has a plan to fund and support Eastern Carver County schools. So far, we have not seen or heard of such a plan. If I am going to stand behind a candidate for Senate, they need to support public schools and not thwart funding that is fundamental to student safety, health, and academic success. I am also hoping to see an op-ed in the papers that lays out this plan and shows evidence of all children being of the utmost importance in all of this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Josh Mulvihill.
Hello, Council. Josh Mulvihill, 5720 Marsh Lake Road. I guess, the opposite side of the coin, I wanted to take an opportunity to publicly thank the mayor for his op-ed, for the letter that he wrote to the community, which was recently published in the magazines and the newspapers, specifically about the equity problem in District 112. Parents and members of the community need to be aware of this radical agenda, which I do believe fuels racism. It doesn't deal with racism, and how it's being implemented in our schools using our tax dollars. Abraham Lincoln once stated, "The philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation is the philosophy of the government in the next." So it's very important what our kids are taught. I think Mayor Funk understands the negative impact of equity in education, how it at times impacts and leads to anti-American views, how it sometimes leads to lower educational outcomes, and at times how it increases discipline problems in the classroom because it views children through the color of their skin rather than the actual activity and outcomes that they lead to. This is not the future that I want for the children in this community or our community even decades down the road. So I appreciate that Mayor Funk has raised the alarm about equity, and I think we should be thankful for Mayor Funk's leadership and his willingness to take a stand on very difficult subjects. And I'm glad that we are having these conversations. So thank you, Mayor Funk, and thank you, Council.
Thank you. Next up, Jeremy Rock. You want to wait until we,
Talk about Marsh Lake Road?
all right, that's fine. Anyone else?
Do I need to fill out a form?
No, come on up. Name and address for the record.
Kate Roberts, 850 Woodland Hills Boulevard. I moved here 4.5 years ago with my family. I have a son who is adopted from Ethiopia and a biological daughter who is as white as they get. I moved here for a sense of community, to find my village, and to move into a school district where I know I could find my son's support. You may think that equity to me is about race. It is not, because we not only have a son who is black, but we also have a son who struggles in school. This morning, I was reminded why this school district is good. I sat in a meeting at Victoria Elementary with a special education teacher, the dean of students, his teacher, and other faculty and staff, talking about what the plan is for him specifically. And I was reminded that that is equity. We also have had the race stuff happen. In first grade, he was at a lunch table where he was told he shouldn't be allowed to have friends because his skin is dirty and black. In fourth grade, he was told to go to the back of the line because that's where black kids belong, by classmates. In both instances, the schools handled it with grace. They handled it quickly. They handled it immediately. I was notified, and I was thankful for what they did, really. It's been hard living here. I've seen this community torn apart by a number of different groups who have come in and tried to say a lot of things that aren't true about what this district is doing and how they're doing it. And I guess my point is I don't stand with what you wrote, Mr. Funk. I don't thank you for what you wrote. And I'm asking that other city council members take a stand. If you don't believe in what he's saying, have the guts to say something about it, please. He railroads you. He says things on behalf of you. I feel like maybe they're true, maybe they're not. But until you start to stand up and make comments that are about what you believe, I don't know. I don't know if I'm supported here. I don't know if my family belongs here. I don't know if we're welcome here. I need that from this community right now. And so I'm asking you to stand up and do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just for the record, the mayors in Carver County were all asked to attend the training. It was hosted by the school district, it was put on by the League of Minnesota Cities, and it was developed by CSI. And so I wrote that from my perspective of attending that training. The rest of the council members were not there. And so I wrote it to specifically highlight what I specifically experienced going through that GARE training. So just so the public knows, the council members were not there. Plus, when I wrote that, I was obviously speaking for myself. All right, anyone else? Okay, next up, the agenda. Can I get a motion to adopt the final agenda, please?
Make a motion, we adopt the final agenda.
Second, please.
Second.
Discussion, any changes? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Second, please.
Second?
Any comments, withdrawals, public, staff? By the way, I was asked by Cindy to make a quick note. On item 610 in the consent agenda, there was one agenda report, a PDF that was added, correct? Yep. After the packet was published? Yep. Right, so the topic was there, but that agenda report was missing. It's now on the website, so available for public? Okay. So does anybody want to pull that item off because it wasn't originally there?
No.
No? Anything else? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, the first regular agenda item, discussion of the city's 2020 legislative priorities with state legislators. Dana?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, members of the council, this evening, we're going to take some time, not a whole lot of time. We've got a lot of agenda, but a lot on our agenda this evening. But we do have our legislators with us this evening, and this is really the city's first attempt in coming up with or formalizing, as you know, we've gone through this process now, but formalizing our legislative priorities for the upcoming legislative session. And the plan would be to do this annually as we go forward and invite our legislative delegation to come speak with us, and that's what we've done here tonight. So we've gone through our process of identifying what's important to us, and we have adopted 3 priorities, and we're going to go through them here this evening and have an open dialogue with our legislative delegation to talk about what we're seeing or what we conceivably predict might happen during the session, which none of us can. But what we feel is important to the residents and the taxpayers of our community. And as bills come up during the session, as people are looking for feedback on things, this will give us a platform for which staff to respond, whether it be signing on to letters of support or opposition or testifying in front of committees. And really give Victoria a voice, but also cities a voice as well. And so this evening, we've invited our legislators to be with us tonight. We'll go through our priorities. There are only 3. And for our first kind of stab at doing this, we wrote everything fairly broad. That gives us the flexibility to respond during the legislative session, but also to make sure when we have, as things come up, we staff will keep the council informed on what's happening, how something might fit into our positions, and how we might be responding to that. But this would give us an opportunity to share that insight with our legislative delegation and an opportunity for them to kind of respond and react and maybe ask some additional questions. And hopefully we can just have an informal dialogue. And then also give our legislative delegation an opportunity to share with us what's important or what they might be seeing coming up, and give us an opportunity to think about, ponder, react to that as part of the discussion.
So, very quickly, do we have a slide that the representatives can look at?
Mayor, members of the council, I did not prepare any slides tonight because the point was to have an informal conversation. But what I'm happy to say is I've got about 15 copies. I've got more if there's interest. I'd be happy to pass them out. So everybody's got a copy. So we'll just take 30 seconds to do that.
Sure.
And I believe you all have it electronically in your packets, but I've got a hard copy if you want a hard copy. Anybody in the audience? What's this?
That's it? Where's the other 2? Oh, there you go, thank you.
Rolling.
Let's just share this.
Great.
Oh, you guys want one? Hard copy?
Yeah.
I'm old fashioned, well, sure.
Okay.
Sorry, I can.
Now I can think of it.
Anybody else? want
Hard to
a
decide
copy?
which I can read.
LGA, that's part of it too.
He said he doesn't want to sit with us.
Yes.
I take a chair over here.
It's like 2 chambers, I guess.
Local control.
Can I bring up how they changed the maximum on the lawsuits for 1.5?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, members of the council, if I might, if I could just take a few minutes and go through briefly, maybe summarize our priority statements, and we'll go through them all 3 at once. That might be easier, and then give you all an opportunity to react, if that works.
Okay.
Go ahead, yes.
Okay. So our first position is local control. That's the category. And really what we're saying here is that local elected officials are in the best position to respond to the needs of its residents and businesses. So as such, cities must have sufficient authority and flexibility to meet the challenges of their communities and have the sufficient revenue to allow us to respond to those needs. So specifically, but broadly, the City of Victoria supports greater access to stable and reliable tax, government aids, and dedicated funding. Laws that provide for municipal franchise fee authority. So the city does collect a cable, has a franchise agreement with a cable company, and so we do collect a cable franchise fee as well as gas and electric. And those gas and electric fees do fund our undergrounding initiatives here in the city. legislative authority that gives cities greater authority and discretion as to what is allowed in our rights-of-way, and then the fees that we charge for use of that right-of-way. Sufficient funding to cover costs for state mandates, and ability for cities to impose infrastructure fees, so growth pays for growth. And really what this is stemmed from the recent Woodbury case, and things that are working in the last legislative session, and as we predict in future sessions, will continue to be a hot topic. And then Victoria opposes legislation that erodes the fundamental principle of local control, and legislation that creates mandates that would add local costs without a corresponding funding mechanism, legislation that limits or takes away our local authority for managing the public use of the right, or the use of the public rights of way, including funding mechanisms, and then legislation that reduces or erodes the ability of the city to cover its costs for growth, and then restrictions on local government budgets such as levy limits or reverse referenda.
Okay, Dana, I tell you what, instead of going through all three and then coming back, why don't we take
Just
these?
pause there.
Yeah, let's pause there. Legislators, first off, thanks for coming tonight. We appreciate you guys taking the time out of your hectic schedules, all right? In about another couple of weeks, you're gonna get real busy. I thought maybe the easiest way to do this is just open it up, if any one of the three of you would like to come up and make comments. Same thing with the council, just have a kind of an open, interactive discussion. And to kind of start it off, if you will, I'm very much opposed to where some of the state agencies, in particular like the Met Council, imposes or takes control away from local officials. And I'll give you an example specifically. One of the things that I've never been happy with is the comprehensive planning process. I think it's a good process for the city to do, but the requirements levied on us by the Met Council, I think, are onerous and expensive. And it takes control away. And I'll give you a specific example of what just happened, and we'll be talking about later tonight. At least it's related. The council unanimously voted to keep Marsh Lake Road a city road instead of going to a county road. The comprehensive plan that was approved before kept it as a county road. The same thing with the county's plan, comprehensive plan, kept it as a county. So as the council said, well, we're going to keep it a city road, let's change our comp plan, that created a disconnect between the city and the county. And then we're trying to work through this, and the Met Council and some of the feedback is, we don't know if we're going to let you do that. I don't think that should be a Met Council decision. That's an example of where I think local control needs to remain with the local elected officials, and there's other examples. So let me pause there. That's an example of what kind of gets me frustrated. Council, anything to add or comments before we ask the legislators to speak to us? No? Gentlemen, anybody want to go first? Jim, I think everybody knows you, but just for the record.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, State Representative Jim Nash, 47A. I have Victoria P3 and then westward. So I remember doing these as a mayor and city council member myself in Waconia, and they're valuable. So we appreciate having this message that we can keep with us. Electronically is always best, so maybe, Dana, we can get PDFs of this because I store it on my iPad. But I understand the frustration with the Met Council. They're very heavy-handed, and they have an incredible ability to change direction. And my principal problem with them is that they don't stand for election. So I think we're all universally agreed that that is a handy tool for rooting out things that you may not agree with. But in particular, I remember doing the comprehensive plan in Waconia when I was mayor, and just the stark lack of a dose of reality that the Met Council brings to those conversations. So I am aligned with you on that, and I'm happy to help you with that. I fought the Met Council on a number of issues in Waconia and in other parts of my district since being elected to the State House. I guess one of my questions, and I'm sure my colleagues would echo this, your first bullet point on greater access to stable and reliable tax government aids and dedicated funding, can you maybe tell me what it is that you're looking for in that? I think we had sort of started early on about talking about, well, are you looking for a formula that gets you LGA or doesn't get you
Yes.
LGA? What are the things that you're looking for? And then I'll open it to Representative Bowe and Senator Jensen as well. And those are big words. That's a big statement, but
Well, we did
detail
it
is always a
broad
good
for
thing.
reason, but yes, the LGA, we never qualify for it. And we'd like to figure out what the formula is and why we don't qualify for it.
Well, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and Councilmember Black, if you can figure out how the formula works, you would be the very first ever. It is a mysterious, gauzy thing that the Met Council uses to figure out your LGA and the legislature. So,
So it's the Met Council.
no, I misspoke. It's the legislature, and usually the formula is it changes frequently. And my recommendation to anybody in municipal government is never rely on LGA because it will disappear. But we can certainly talk about LGA as it's being as formulas are being produced in the future. I think you've gotten the LGA report that came out. I don't remember off the top of my head. You didn't get anything, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Victoria's never gotten any, have we?
I don't know
Once
that.
A long time ago.
I don't know if never, I don't know never. In the
Yeah.
recent past, we have not been a recipient, and under the most recent two changes, a more comprehensive formula change a few years ago, and then last year's, we'll call it a minor adjustment to that formula, Victoria continues to receive 0 LGA.
What's the general theory behind it? I mean, it's been years since I delved into it, but
Right.
how is it supposed to be allocating?
So, Councilmember Vogt, Mayor, members of the council, this could be probably its own work
Yeah,
session.
a couple of
know,
days.
Just top level, you know.
So,
Well, I'll jump in for the manager, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. It initially was, for lack of a better term, to cover moving parts like policing and roads and physical things that required sometimes funding from an outside source, namely the state. But again, it has morphed into things that don't really match up with that. So I think that I would be probably in universal agreement also with my colleagues that some massive LGA reform needs to happen because from my perspective, it is not a fair formula. It favors Minneapolis and St. Paul, both of whom have tremendously larger tax bases than, say, the city of Victoria, city of Cologne, Carver. Pick a city in Carver County, and it's got a widely better tax base, and yet they receive the lion's share of the LGA. So I think that it's probably a very important conversation that we have to change how it works.
But
Councilmember
can't
Vogt?
somebody just say in 2 sentences what this is supposed to do?
I think the original idea was that it covered basic services that communities couldn't cover on their own
Correct.
through their tax
Was
base.
supposed to help cities that needed an extraordinary amount of something, whether it be policing or,
Well, I think the word, Councilmember Vogt, the word extraordinary might be, I think it was there to create a fund for essentials that over and above what the tax base of the city that might be receiving it is, and it's been morphed into a lot of other things.
So it's not really what it was originally intended to be.
I find it incredible that nobody can talk about it and say what the hell it is. So that,
Yeah.
we might,
Do we know what the budget of LGA is currently with the current?
I don't have it off the top of my head. Perhaps Senator Jensen does, nope.
You guys don't keep that number in your pocket?
Don't memorize those.
we did, we couldn't sleep.
I think it, and I don't want to hog all the time, but I think it, along with fiscal disparities, is something that is in desperate need of reform.
So if we're broke, we get some money.
Not necessarily.
Real quick, the Victoria's never gotten LGA, so I've had no experience as mayor dealing with it. But somebody had told me at one time it was kind of earmarked, and maybe earmark's not the right term to use, but kind of intended to help communities that don't have the tax base, maybe more rural, outside because they've got to have some basic services. And if you have a small town with, say, 1,000 people, they may not be able to put a well in or whatever the case may be. But yet, to your point about how this is really kind of flipped around with Minneapolis, St. Paul, what was it you told me before we started, 50 million in LGA?
They receive millions and millions of dollars.
Millions,
I can
so
get you the
we'll just
exact
say
numbers.
million,
Yeah.
that's all right. They receive millions. To me, it seems like this
Should be the other way around.
completely
Yes.
the other way around, exactly. The communities that need those basic services should get the LGA, not
And
Minneapolis, St.
to
Paul.
Councilmember Vogt's question, it was initially intended to be not prescriptive, like, oh, you have to use it for policing, or you have to use it for fire, you have to use it. It was to cover the basic essentials, and there is a large amount of latitude that's left to the municipalities as to how they use that. My recommendation to all of them is never, ever, ever depend on it, because there are cities that have, and then it got changed, so bad things happened.
Representative Nash, my understanding is there's some cities in Minnesota whose 50% of their budget is LGA.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember McMillan, you are correct.
So couldn't you tell us who that is? I want
Look at
to,
her, she's like a cat with a.
No, I know that that's,
Yeah,
I know that that's.
and I don't have them, again, committed to memory, but there are a good number of Minnesota cities that heavily depend on LGA, and were it to be absent, their budgets would be gutted.
so in those cases, it's working, but no one could talk about the overall picture as being, okay.
Senator Jensen?
Senator Jensen's gonna have a go.
Yeah, I think he knows something.
Good evening, council members and mayor and staff support. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Yeah, LGA initially was in many areas of our budget. We created an opportunity to, as you mentioned, Mayor Funk, those districts that maybe didn't have the tax base or the ability to collect dollars and revenues at the same level others could. So LGA was going to be used for that. And we do the same thing in school districts where we'll have this equity funding and things like that. But it's become politicized, as Representative Nash mentioned. And so now it's, if you will, divvied up in a manner that really isn't fair.
Let me clarify one point because of some of the earlier comments. The equity funding for the school districts has no relation to the equity programs. It's
No.
they're two
Mayor
different-
Funk, I'm speaking to the LGA thing. I'm just saying that at the capital level, when we have line items on our budget, we will create line items that are there available to help the, if you will, disadvantaged entity, whether we're dealing with a school district or whether we're dealing with a municipal district. We even have some of those funds if we're dealing with townships. So we have these across the budget, and I think that that's what Representative Nash was getting at as well. And it has become politicized, but it's no different than what we're seeing at virtually every level of government that we help fund. And we help fund townships, we help fund municipalities, we help fund school districts. And so all of those have this, and in each situation, it frequently becomes politicized. Clearly, we've jumped ahead to number 2, I think, on your thing. And I was confused by the verbiage, and I'm just going to start with that. Then I'm going to go back to number 1. But you indicated that the City of Victoria currently doesn't receive any LGA funding, and that's correct. You advocate for formula-based allocations, and I appreciate what you're advocating for, but the likelihood of that happening is not good. So then your next statement goes on to say that you oppose any LGA appropriation freezes. And I need to share with you that I'm not certain that I would agree with you here. And I don't know that you should be stating that as well, because if you're not getting anything and we increase the amount of money that's going to go to LGA funding, you're going to continue to get nothing from a pot that's growing bigger, and you're going to help pay into it to fund it, because you do help fund it, because the dollars that come from you go to, if you will, our general fund. So I think that we need to be careful on that one, and that if we're not going to be able to get a better allocation system, then freezing it may be appropriate, or putting maximums on it so that certain counties or certain municipalities in this situation can't get more than their share, because it does become very political. Having pointed out that concern I had regarding the verbiage, I would like to just turn back to number 1 on the local control. I would like to give kudos to Representative Nash. He's been a stalwart, if you will, oversight committee of one, in that he watches these kinds of things quite closely at the legislative level as to what's happening that's going to impact on local control. And I agree with this concern completely. One thing that I wanted to ask you about is, what is your position on tax increment financing? Because your bullet under the City of Victoria opposes, it'd be number 5. Your bullet says, the legislation that erodes the ability of the city to cover the costs of growth and corresponding needs for public infrastructure. Oftentimes for a city, tax increment financing is one of your most useful tools to utilize. And so I assume that the City of Victoria would oppose any legislation that would take that tool away from you. But because I have been aware of other conversations you've had, I thought that I'd like to know exactly what the City Council thinks about tax increment financing. Many cities in my district, Senate 47, have had tax increment financing tools used very adroitly. And if that's something that you agree with, then we will, or at least I will, try to make certain that that tool is not removed from you. But I would like to hear what your thoughts are in regards to that, because I understand clearly that tax increment financing can be an abused tool. But I think I also have seen clearly where it was able to provide a measure of growth support and, if you will, increased and enhanced tax base if done correctly. So I'd be open for comments
Yeah, I
on that.
agree with everything you just said there. Used properly, it's a great tool, and I would hate to lose that opportunity for that tool.
Thank you.
But it can be abused, and that's been
Yes.
my position all along. But it is something definitely want to keep in the
Okay, thank you.
available to us.
Dr. Jensen, agree 100% that we have used it and we needed it and we will need it again. It's used judiciously. I haven't seen any gross problems. And I would just dread the thought that we wouldn't have that tool.
Okay. I think that there have been some real abuses, particularly in the metropolitan area. And I think the easiest abuse to identify is when a project that would have taken place anyway taps into the tax increment financing benefits. That's clearly where it should not be utilized. But I know in Watertown, we've been able to do some things, and that's where I work most of my time as a physician. We've been able to do some things we wouldn't have otherwise been able to do. I would also like to comment on local control and the Metropolitan Council overreach. Again, this is a unique organization. If you look at city planning, metropolitan planning areas, and there's only a handful, if that enjoy the authority that the Met Council does in this area around the country. And the ability for them to literally tax without, as Representative Nash said, be responsive to an elected body, that's problematic in and of itself. So we have to remember what it was originally designed for, and we have to hold their feet to the fire. And that's going to be a long, arduous task, but I think one of the things that would help the most would be to stagger terms, to not have the Met Council have sweeping changes in its membership when a governor steps in. Those are the kinds of things that make it even more politicized. So I couldn't agree with you more that the Met Council overreach, the way they govern themselves, is problematic. I appreciate the clarification on the TIF, and in regards to the LGA, I don't think we're going to get a formula-based allocation in the next session. So from my perspective, when I see cities like Victoria that have clear needs, but a perception out there that you don't have needs for LGA funding, there's a disconnect that's problematic for me. I look at Victoria and I see your growth, and I know that you could benefit from some LGA funding. And I also know that sometime tonight I would like to chat with you a little bit about some form of bonding support, so that if there were a desire on your part to look at, is there a way that you can get some infrastructure in the bonding bill, such as help for a public parking facility or ramp, something like that. We need to get on that queue so that we can start moving the City of Victoria's needs forward, because I don't think we've done an adequate job on that. Thank you, council members.
Yeah,
Senator,
thank you.
Senator Jensen, can I ask a quick question?
Go ahead.
So the Met Council reform piece of things, that's been teed up in previous sessions. Do you see that going anywhere this session? We talked about staggered terms. We talked about appointment of elected officials, some of those
The
kinds of
appetite for the
reforms.
legislature to do anything that could be controversial this coming session will be very small because of the upcoming elections.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Representative Bowe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Greg Bowe, State Representative for District 47B, which is roughly the eastern two-thirds of Victoria, as well as two-thirds of Chanhassen and all of Chaska. Pleasure to be here tonight. I appreciate this opportunity, and I look forward to having this become a yearly way for us to learn more about what you're thinking and vice versa too. So just a couple of quick thoughts. Local control, absolutely. As a conservative, I tend to want to have local control and have those decisions more made at the local level, because you are the most well-suited to know what your community wants and needs. And so to have those decisions made locally makes perfect sense. And I think that's the best way to have that decision be in touch with the needs and the desires of the community. I did want to just talk LGA for a second as well. As a council member for 10 years in Chaska, I can tell you that there was a time early on when we received well over $1 million in LGA one year. That was good. And we had it in our budget for the following year then to assume we would get similar funding. Well, the next year came and we got zero. And that left quite a hole in the city's budget. So we learned from that mistake. Fool me once, shame on you. So we then the following year made a budget without any LGA. And then we were penalized for not budgeting for LGA and having that be part of our decision-making planning process moving forward into the future. So it's very confusing. And so we learned the hard way to assume that, or hope that LGA would come, but not assume that it would, if that makes any sense. So it's an odd deal. LGA is a tough one. Fiscal disparity is also another one that I want to look at and get a better handle on how that's determined and how that's assigned and metered out based on needs and abilities and all that sort of stuff. But it's become a very complicated formula that no one understands, and it really ends up being, with fiscal disparities anyway, in the metro, you've got tens of millions of dollars where some cities are givers and others are takers or receivers, and it's a way to try to level the playing field, but it's very unfair to a lot of municipalities that have taken steps to create development, whether it be residential or business or entertainment or retail, and a lot of expenses come with that type of development, but yet that's deemed to be a community that doesn't need help with fiscal disparities because you've created that kind of development already. So in fact, you're taking on extra expenses and extra responsibilities and yet not being compensated and in fact being penalized for that. So we need to take a closer look at that, I think.
Thank you. Council? I think we have one last one, effective delivery of local government services. Council, anything to add or any questions for our legislators on that? Senator Jensen?
I think this is very important, and thank you, council members and staff and Mayor Funk for bringing this up. Specifically, public meetings that you have, you're held to a high standard that at the legislature we don't hold ourselves to. And I think that's problematic in and of itself. I know that the Victoria city and community over the last 5 years has certainly been embroiled in the whole process of open meetings and things like that. And in many ways, you have been trailblazing concerns and discussions around the country, even not just around the state. I think when I was on the school board in the 1990s, I am certain that we violated the open meeting law many times without realizing it. Recently in the papers, I think last week, there were several headline articles about a state commission that was not functioning according to the open meeting law. And yet at the legislature, we don't hold ourselves to that at all. We exempt ourselves from the open meeting law. So we don't have some of the problems you have. If you have a couple people emailing back and forth about a topic that you're concerned about, and all of a sudden someone else joins in, and then somehow a fourth person gets pulled in, all of a sudden, conceivably, you violated the open meeting law, and I think that's ridiculous. If we're going to play that kind of game, then for heaven's sakes, let's have the legislature play the same way, and we'll see how much we get done. If you think we have gridlock now, wait till we do that. I think it's going to have to be, if you will, dissected. This whole thing about open meetings. It was good legislation and it was important, but with social media and texting and emailing, I think we're going to have to step back and say, how does this work? If the legislature says they're not going to do it, if the governor's office doesn't do it, but we make every city council, every township, every school district do it, this is a problem. So I will be speaking up on this in the coming session. And then the last thing is, I think in terms of transparency, I think sometimes people sort of wed transparency with the open meeting law. I think we can look at the open meeting law and conceivably make that better and still maintain our absolute commitment to transparency of government actions to the public. I think we need to separate those. Those aren't the same. But I do think that if the legislature is not going to operate according to the open meeting law, then I don't know how we can ask you to. Thank you.
All right. The, since I'm very familiar with the open meeting law, I'm going to speak to that.
Mayor.
Yeah, no, not at all, right? What is it again? The, everybody knows the history of Victoria and what happened. I think it's important here to point out that the open meeting law is about 2 pages long. It's very simple, very easy. The judge in the district court case literally said, and I'm paraphrasing her words, the average citizen can read and understand the open meeting law in a matter of minutes. This is not rocket science. It's simple. It's easy to do. And I do think that elected officials, if you allow this to happen and be done outside of the public view, the public loses value, right? There's these backroom deals, I'll argue, cost the taxpayers of Victoria a significant lost value in the deals that were made for this city hall and the public works. And now, just to give you an idea, this building's 6 years old. We're already out of space. We just got a $300,000, let me finish. We got a $300,000 bill because the IT infrastructure that was put in place was out of date when it was installed. The audiovisual was like late 1980s technology, and the HVAC has never worked right, and we've got no way to hold them accountable. This building's only 6 years old. Carver did it right, out in the open in front of everybody. People could question it. They built a building that's top-notch and will last them 50 years, right? We built a building with the taxpayers' money, previous council did, I should say, and here we are 6 years later, and we've got all of these problems with the building. This is why I think the open meeting law is so important. I agree with your comment about the legislator. I don't know how you do it because the functional difference between the legislature and a local city council like this is pretty significant as far as the types of issues that you're dealing with. So finally, one final point. Back in '96, the Minnesota Supreme Court removed elected officials for intentional violations of the law. They said, and it was the Supreme Court that said, once you're in office for 3 months, you're expected to know the law. And it's that simple. I think that does need to be put in place because the public should have a right to hold their elected officials accountable. So go ahead.
And thank you again, Council, and Mayor Funk. I think we're talking about legislative priorities on a broad spectrum today, and I appreciate the summary of your situation or concerns in regards to the city of Victoria. Nevertheless, I think that the open meeting law is problematic, and I will continue to say that. And just because it's short doesn't mean it's simple. If I recall, the 10 commandments that came down from Mount Sinai are even shorter, and I wouldn't call them simple. So thank you.
Representative Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. So thank you for the priorities. Can we talk about maybe some of the things that weren't on there so we can be cognizant of that as we're heading down there? You know, one of the things that I know that impacts Carver County in general is transportation. So can you maybe give me your perspective on transportation priorities? Obviously, Highway 5, you know, proximity to 212, other things that are going along that way. And if we could, you know, talk about some of the MSA funds that you get to the city manager. I don't know what you get in MSA funding, municipal state aid. So important part of the overall function of what's going from St. Paul to here. But maybe throw out some thoughts on transportation because putting my former mayor's hat on, it was pretty much all we ever talked about. And it's important. And I'll tell you, the further you get away from St. Paul, the more meaningless you become. As it relates to transportation funding. So if you could.
Let me start this one. I attended a meeting with, I don't know, 5, 6 mayors down in Chaska City Hall. The chair of the Met Council was there. The MDOT commissioner was there. A lot of senior staff. A couple county commissioners were there. The bottom line is this. They were talking about the funding gap for 212 and I absolutely support that. I think that needs to be done. But I was shocked when the MnDOT commissioner said they have a 25-year planning horizon and Highway 5 is not even in their plan. And so I asked them, to the chair of the Met Council, so you take our money without representation and you divert that. And a few years ago, when you changed your rule on how you allocate those funds, was one of the contributing factors why the county passed their transportation tax, so that we had funds for this. And then after we have to do that, you're telling us that after you take our money, the biggest single issue we face in the communities just west, northwest, and southwest of us that go through Victoria, for 25 years, it's not even in your planning cycle? It's like, you got to be kidding me. So to your point, Highway 5 it's already unsafe, right? The only thing that's happened recently, we're going to talk about it later tonight, is because of the Minnewaska Parkway road work, they're going to put in a temporary light there. And I think you guys know, but in case you don't, the Arboretum's planning on moving their entrance to across from Minnewaska Parkway. When that light goes up, even if it's temporary, I don't think it should ever come down as long as the timing gets set with the other lights. But we really need to get Highway 5. We can't wait 25 years. It's already a problem today. Finally, I don't know if you know, so just for your benefit, there is this countywide, citywide, it's us, Chanhassen, and Chaska, along with the county for the Arboretum Transportation Plan. Was that the
We are
three
going
cities?
to get an update
Right.
on that later.
Yeah, we're going to have an update on that later. So we're working within the county to do this, but it doesn't matter because the state, 5 is a state highway. We need to get them on board. And so if there's anything you can do related to that, I would be eternally grateful for that. And I'm sure the people of Victoria would love that too. Judy?
Yeah. Additionally, we are paying that extra 0.5% tax for our roads. And I've met with the commissioner and the county engineer about some safety problems that we have with crosswalks and such. And they're waiting for their fees to be figured out. And even if they do go by his recommendation, we're still going to have to pay half to get a safety crosswalk. So why are we paying 0.5% plus we have to pay half of a safety crosswalk across a county road? I mean, we're getting hit twice. So I think we need to figure out where is our money going and why are we paying twice for something?
Maybe we can get LGA for it.
Yeah, right.
And it is more than one crosswalk.
Oh, yeah. I
Not
mean,
just
it's
one.
numerous. I mean, I've been on council for 1 year now, and the first thing I got was, it's not safe here, it's not safe here, it's not safe here. We've been waiting, they paved, and then they didn't put the crosswalk back, or the crossing, and then I find out, well, it's not safe. What, do you think it's safer by not even putting lines? So that's the kind of thing that I'm running into. I'm finding it just takes forever to get an answer for something.
Thank you again. In regards to transportation, I think you're absolutely right. Highway 5 does need to get into line, and it won't be 25 years, but that's what they'll say right now. And the most important thing we can do is this session, we can go ahead and get a bill supporting funding for Highway 5. And so I've already taken the liberty of starting to write that bill. I think it'll be jacketed probably within the week. And I've talked with Senator Senjum, who's the head of the bonding bill, and then Senator Scott Newman in regards to Highway 5. And I think that we just need to get that in there. It won't go anywhere, but it'll be in the queue. And then in terms of the parking ramp I mentioned earlier, I do think that you should start to think about getting the bonding tour to include Victoria. And
How do we do that?
well, the best thing to do is to work with the bonding tours that take place in both the House and the Senate. I have more to do with that in the Senate, in part because that's where I sit, but also because my party is in the majority in that. But I know that this year we had quite a little deal out at Bond Guards to show that 212 off. And I think if there's a way we could do that in Highway 5 and, in Victoria, and demonstrate the fact that all roads lead to Victoria, so to speak. And that you
We'll
could,
have them come out at rush hour.
yeah. Well, I was thinking, try to be more friendly than that, Mayor Funk. I was thinking something of being more cordial and
Yeah.
actually winning them over. But I'll leave that up to you. And then in terms of the 0.5% tax that you pay and for a roadway, you're not going to be able to pay for a lot of projects with those dollars. What you're really doing when you step up and say, okay, we're willing to participate in that, is you're demonstrating that you will provide seed money. And really, the Carver County Transportation Department does a very good job. Kudos to Lyndon Robgen. The guy really knows transportation. And so I did meet with him and talk to him about Highway 5. And I think that if the legislature hears that, yes, the cities of Carver County are participating and they've got this much seed money to put towards a project, oftentimes, they'll give money. Carver County will give money, the state will give money, and they'll help us find an access point into the federal coffers, if you will. So I don't really think that you're going to want to look at those tax dollars that you're getting through that 0.5% tax as something that'll be able to start and finish a project. You're going to need to use that as leverage and demonstrate that you're a willing and participating player in that process. I do think that it's very clear that Victoria and many cities in Carver County have been, if you will, givers for a long time. And the Robin Hood character that the legislature pays ends up shorting you folks over and over again.
I'll just be very brief. Having, Mr. Mayor and members of the council, having been a mayor and having argued and lobbied successfully for transportation and economic development grants back in the day, I would encourage you to not just rely on the three of us, but to show up, to come down and advocate. I will tell you that when I poked my nose into various people's offices and said, hi, I'm the mayor of the city of Waconia, and we have a need, they listened sometimes more than they would to the three of us, because you're, one, a new face, two, you're bringing a very local perspective to this, and you're able to deliver more granular detail than the three of us can store away either on an iPad or in our memories, because you're living it day to day. And when I went down there with our city administrator, as we drove down there, we were literally encouraging each other to get loaded for bear because we were going to get our message across. I'm happy to help you do that. Rumor has it I like a good fight. But it's important that you also take a little bit of time, if you have it, and come down to the Capitol. It's a beautiful building. I'll buy you lunch. Come on down. But let people know that you're here. I mean, sometimes out in Carver County, I feel like we're Horton Hears a Who. We need a very loud voice to let the people down in the metro area, out or inside the 494 ring, know that there are people and Minnesotans outside of the 494 ring. And that's not a perspective that you get if you're a bureaucrat down there every single day. It's vitally important that the local electeds, along with state representatives, state senators, say, hey, this is important. And we're happy to walk you around and help you book an appointment. But it's really, really critical that you say, you know what, I'm going to take a day. I'm going to go down to the Capitol, and I'm going to beat the door down of everybody that'll listen. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I concur. Obviously, it's important to be down there. I remember doing it as a council member as well, and they do like to hear from you, and it's a great way to get your message there and have it more personalized. I also want to echo what Senator Jensen said, and that is that 0.5% sales tax from the county really is money that the county can bring to the table when they're seeking much larger amounts of money from state and federal sources. But having that money at the table allows them to be much more successful in their efforts to get various grants from state and federal. But so it's not an end-all, cure-all, but it's a way to get a ticket to the table to talk about the bigger dollars that we can use. So the wheelage fee and the 0.5% sales tax really is a way just to have money to bring to the table for that discussion. And I would also concur that we need to continue to have those talks not only about Highway 5, Minnewaska Parkway, entrance to the Arboretum, but also, the discussions about 82nd Street and closing the gap on County Road 18 and having that east-west arterial on the south side of the Arboretum property. And then I know we've talked about trails and completing and closing the gaps on the trails that go north and south on Bavaria and other things like that, just to provide safer pedestrian ability to travel through your community as well. So, and last but not least, I just wanted to touch base on your item number 3. Transparency is so important because it allows residents not only to follow the process and the things you're doing, but also to participate because they know what's going on and when. And last but not least, unfunded mandates. It really is it forces local government to raise taxes and/or to cut services. So when that unfunded mandate comes down the pipe, you have to find ways to fund it and then make up the gap somewhere else to close that gap. And so it's an unfair way, and it's an unfair burden on local government. So,
All
thank
right,
you.
well, thank you to each of you. Do you have Senator Jensen, one more thing?
I was just going to make one last comment. I think I sent to several of you a copy of the governor's proposal for the bonding bill. And that was a big bonding bill, and undoubtedly it will not end up being that big. It'll be somewhere between what the two sides are saying. But I would encourage you to look through that, and if there's something in there that you see might fit with your own needs, then I think Senator Sanjum's committee legislative administrator, Susie, you could easily call down to his office and get that. And then ask, and Susie's really good, and she'll walk you through it and say, how could we try to structure a request that, because we see that in town XYZ, they got some support for surface parking pavement or something like that, so that we could start building something so that we can help Victoria, because clearly one of you, and you don't need me to tell you this, but one of your biggest needs is downtown parking. Yeah. So if we could start doing that, I think that'd be great. So I would use that bonding. I don't think I had everybody's email address, so I think I only sent it to perhaps 2 or 3 people. If you could send that out.
Senator, Mayor, members of the council, I did send that out about a week, 10 days ago, whenever I received that from the senator. So if you don't have it in your email or want me to forward it again, I'm happy to do that.
I've got it. The projects really are all the way from A to Z. And so if you find something in there, say, well, maybe we could utilize this as a seed idea. That's what I would do. I'd encourage you to do that.
Okay.
Perfect.
Mayor.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. Any final, yes, go ahead.
Mayor, thank you. Members of the council, to our senator and our representatives, thank you for taking the time this evening to spend with our council and our residents here. We really appreciate it. We know you're all busy preparing for the upcoming session, so we do appreciate your support. Representative Nash, I think you had asked what our allocation is for MSA. We actually just got that this week or Friday, either Friday or Monday. So our 2020 allocation is $444,000. So $111,000 of that is for maintenance, and the balance is for construction. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, council, any final comments? Thank you to each of you. I know you guys are busy and coming in here and talking to us. The one final closing remark I'll make is this is the first time that we've actually done this as a council and put stuff together, so we appreciate your feedback. If there's anything more that comes out of this based on some of the comments, right, we'll have a workshop on it, and we'll get you updates as the council deems appropriate. So again, thank you all for coming here tonight.
Thank you so very much.
Really appreciate it.
Okay, next up, item 7.2, update on the Arboretum Transportation Plan. Ira, you have the mic.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. That was a fantastic segue. To talk about transportation funding to then have this update next here on the agenda. We are intending, as things are kind of heating up on the study process, we will be providing updates at the second meeting of the month each month. Now, sometimes there might not be much to say, but we want to make sure the public is hearing about the project and the council's hearing about the project. I am intending to spend a little bit more time tonight because we just came through a series of important steps in the process. So in the staff report, I referenced the project website, and I am going to just pull that up to make sure people remember to go to it. So the website itself has a lot of useful information about the study, and if you click on the additional information tab, then you can get all sorts of details for people who really want to dive into the technical detail, as well as information from open houses are also housed on this project page. So it's a good tool for information. As a reminder, this graphic here shows the study area. So it includes Highway 5 from Chanhassen all the way through Victoria, as well as Rolling Acres Road, Bavaria, and then 82nd Street and 41 as well. In order to move through the process, this is a 2-year study, but the study was broken into segments because we couldn't possibly tackle every segment at once, so there's sub-areas. The first 2 sub-areas were Highway 5 and 82nd Street West were the main subareas that had work underway. And up until this point, we had a series of open houses and public meetings with neighborhood groups and the Stakeholder Advisory Committee. If you recall, you appointed members of the public to participate in that process. We've gone through and gathered public input on the problems with these corridors, but more importantly, concepts have been developed for improvements to the corridor that were shared with the public at an open house in December of 2019. So I want to step through some of those concepts. As a reminder, when we get to the end of this process, the City Council will be asked to essentially concur with the work that's been developed. So at the end of the day, you will need to be taking action on the outcome of the work through this very process that engages lots of people and stakeholders along the way. So first, we're just going to talk about Highway 5 here quick, and this specifically relates to the segment from 41 to Rolling Acres Road, so the east segment. The study has confirmed the need that that segment of road does need to be improved to 4-lane to accommodate the really the current traffic and the 2040 traffic projections. We kind of stepped through that a little bit at a previous update. This slide, all of this information again is found on the website that I just referenced, but this just highlights some of the feedback that we got from the public about the issues. So I wouldn't say there were any big surprises. All of you are very familiar with the corridor and know what types of challenges and safety concerns happen in this general area. Back in this open house in July of 2019, we had over 130 different people participate in this public engagement process. So we're getting really pretty good turnout, both at meetings and through online feedback. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but I do want to note that one of the first things that the Technical Advisory Committee and the consultant team looks at is what the design constraints are on the corridor. So looking at environmental impacts, any other sort of land use constraints, things of that nature is layered into the study work. But then we moved on to evaluation of concepts, and the team set project goals for how we would evaluate each concept that came before the Technical Advisory Committee, looking at things like vehicle mobility, user safety, of course, multimodal network. So you know, that concern that we've all had about needing to be able to have pedestrians safely get across 5, travel along 5, certainly the bicyclists that we see moving along 5, respecting the environment, and then, of course, we need to come up with a financially responsible implementation plan that can actually be implemented. Every concept that's been developed is rated based on all of these different goals. And this is the different range of rating. So red, not meeting the measure, all the way up to this green color here, noting that it's exceeding what the goals are for the concept. So at the meeting in December, all of the concepts were up on boards at the Arboretum, and people were asked to really look at all of the concepts and identify which concepts they could support. So you could maybe support 2, 3, 4 concepts or no concepts. You could vote more than once. And I think it's helpful to just touch on some of these with the City Council. So one of the biggest elements is looking at the intersection improvements for all of the intersections along the corridor. So the first one I'm showing you here is the intersection of Highway 5 and Rolling Acres Road. We know that that's a horribly challenging intersection in its condition today with backups in all directions. I often will have a voicemail early in the morning on my phone here from somebody who's stuck in traffic saying, please call me back and tell me when somebody's going to do something about that intersection because they can't get through it. So on the left here, you have a full access signalized intersection. What's different from what is there today is you have a double left turn lane from the southbound direction and turn lanes in all the directions. So right now, there's a left turn lane and a shared right turn lane coming from Rolling Acres Road. This middle concept included a separate northbound to eastbound acceleration lane. And then this third concept was for a 2-lane roundabout with right turn bypass. So the scores you see here are the scores that the technical advisory committee came up with. But these aren't the final decision about what the recommendations would be for these intersections. We're going to take the public feedback that we received through the process and then circle back as a group to see what makes the most sense. I'm going to turn the page. The next one is the intersection of Highway 5 and Minnewaska. As I believe the council is aware, the Arboretum has, in their master plan, they're going to be relocating the entrance to the Arboretum to the intersection of Minnewaska. They're in the process of actually obtaining proposals for design work to figure out how they're going to do all that on their end. Certainly with that relocation, the intersection will meet warrants for a signalized intersection or a roundabout. As the mayor noted earlier tonight, Minnewaska Parkway, which is also on the agenda later on tonight, so we could talk about it in both places, but Minnewaska Parkway is scheduled to be reconstructed over the next 2 years. They're going to do that in 2 phases, the north half and the south half. So when they're constructing the north half, the only way in and out is going to be through the intersection of Minnewaska and 5, which is going to put some considerable added pressure on that intersection. MnDOT has given him approval for a temporary traffic light, and that would be installed in 2021. That's when that construction is scheduled for. But with these plans for the Arboretum to reroute the intersection, and you know, we all echo the mayor's concern that once you put that light in there, removing it is not going to be supported by the public. So MnDOT's also, you know, chatting and talking with the Arboretum to understand their timing to determine what's temporary versus what's permanent. But as part of the study, we looked at 2 different intersection types for this intersection, either a signalized intersection or a roundabout. The roundabout rated less high than the traffic signal, and part of that has to do with the volumes of traffic on 5 and then the ability to accommodate event traffic. Event traffic is a huge consideration in looking at this intersection. So that happens not necessarily at the same time as peak traffic, but so the traffic modelers are also looking at how to accommodate that event traffic. The intersection of the current Arboretum access and Crimson Bay, there's a couple of different scenarios being evaluated there, and working with the residents off Crimson Bay and talking with Chanhassen about the ability to connect Crimson Bay up to 78th Street to the north. There's a lot of interesting discussion around that, concerns about whether the church traffic would start cutting through if that roadway connection goes through. But yeah, the Arboretum is planning to use what is their current entrance would become an exit only. So you would come in off of Minnewaska, but you would have the ability to exit out this way is what their current thought is for how they'll operate internally. The next intersection, Highway 5 and Highway 41, is traffic engineer's mind-blowing deal to try to figure out how to fit all the traffic through this intersection. So concept 1 is really just blowing it out to full turn lanes, additional lanes, and dual lefts in all directions. That doesn't quite get things where they need to be, so they're also looking at what are referred to as partial displaced left turn intersections. I'm going to show you this graphic that blows that up a bit. There is not currently one of these constructed in Minnesota.
Wow.
So we'll see as the study works through the process to evaluate whether MnDOT would be supportive of this, but it is looking much more effective for moving the traffic through. There is a video that's more useful than this graphic that I certainly can send to you if it's not on the project website if you want to understand how that works. But essentially, if you're making a left-hand turn to go north on 41, you end up going through a stoplight and crossing to the other side of the road. But that allows traffic to continue to move in the through direction. So you can end up moving more traffic through the intersection in a shorter
There
amount of time.
wasn't one of these in Minnesota?
Correct.
Yeah, I can see why.
Isn't there one by you turn into the airport?
Yeah, it's not exactly the same, but that's the one they reference as being that same sort of feeling where suddenly you're on the wrong side of the road and you don't quite know how you got there.
You're going to Terminal 2, yeah.
Yeah, I was just there.
So the study team's in the process of, the consultant team and MnDOT are in the process of evaluating this as an alternative, because when you start to look at the long-range traffic projections, a traditional intersection just isn't moving the traffic through. So then, are you getting into something like an overpass or an underpass, highway level traffic. So more to come on that, but that was an interesting piece.
Is this less expensive than an overpass or an underpass? So that's why they,
Yeah, and right-of-way is a challenge here because of the Arboretum property. Before I move on from Highway 5, is there any questions about any of that? I will, I guess, show, also included on the page is a full-blown layout for Highway 5. This is what we're looking at for a typical section, so 4-lane divided with a median. From Minnewash to Rolling Acres Road, we're recommending trails on both sides of the road. So I don't know how much time we want to spend through walking through the layout, but there is a full layout developed looking at how that would fit through there. Of course, you're all well aware of the challenging section that we've always talked about through the wetlands. How do we make that 4 lanes? So the study group is looking at 2 options, either a lightweight fill type of construction like was done out here back in 2012, or alternatively a land bridge, like the 101 land bridge. Obviously, the bridge is going to be more expensive, but it would minimize the environmental impacts. So the group is also consulting with the DNR and evaluating both of those options through there. So that's Highway 5. The next corridor that I'll touch on is 82nd Street. So this is future County Road 18 behind the Arboretum. So the study's gone through the same process of taking a look at need and, wondering when the connection is needed. So what's that timing question? What should the corridor look like? How will access and crossing be handled? Also, just taking a look at what sorts of traffic would divert over to County Road 18 if it was improved. So current traffic is in that 390-ish range. If it was open and improved, we could see that jump up to 4,000 to 6,000. The 8,200 represents what the 2040 ADT would be if 82nd Street was improved and Highway 5. The other thing happening at the Arboretum is they're looking at additional access from 82nd Street for some planned improvements that they have happening. So they, of course, would like to see that improved to be on a gravel condition to accommodate what their plans are. This slide just shows information we've heard from the people who've participated in neighborhood meetings related to that roadway. Same thing, went through and did the design considerations to figure out what sort of challenges were in the area. Same goals as we talked about on Highway 5, and same rating process used in looking at the concepts. Now this one, we'll first start with intersections. So the study area does include the intersection of 82nd Street and Bavaria, which has long also been an intersection that we receive calls about challenges making a left-hand turn off of 82nd Street onto Bavaria, particularly in the AM when you have morning traffic coming up Bavaria. So the study looked at both a roundabout and a traffic signal, and the rating thus far from the technical advisory committee was showing the roundabout as being preferred. Again, these will be reevaluated once we layer in the public input that we've gotten on the options.
Real quick, all of this is online, right?
Yes.
All right.
Yep. The intersection then of McKnight and 82nd Street was looked at. Same thing at where 82nd Street, County Road 18 would meet Highway 41, looking at a traffic signal or a roundabout there. What's a little bit more complicated on 82nd Street, though, is the question of what should the roadway alignment be. The current roadway alignment doesn't meet minimum design standards for horizontal curves. So they're looking at how to reroute the road. So before they got to the point of just developing concepts, they wanted to get the feedback from the public on different alignments. So you could follow this yellow alignment or you could follow the green alignment. So here you're starting to impact property. Here you're impacting some prized trees on the Arboretum property that only exist in some small percentage of the world. They're not just regular trees, as I understand it from the Arboretum. And then same thing as you approach the McKnight intersection, there's a couple of different alignments at play. Either, bringing, this would require a property acquisition, this would bring a road behind somebody's house. This impacts Arboretum property, which can be a challenge depending on what the property is used for. You'll note that in the group's original ranking, none of them turned out as great. They're tough choices for how to fit through there. So Chaska's working pretty closely on this section with their residents as they work through those choices. So eventually these will get turned into concepts once we start layering in the public feedback that was received.
Kara, just real quick, on 41 in Lyman, I thought they were already building a roundabout.
So that is in another city.
But didn't your slide show two options there?
Yeah, so the roundabout is already, I'll have to check that.
I thought it was under construction.
I'm somewhat useless when we leave Victoria city limits.
Okay.
But there is a roundabout under construction here, so I don't know the answer to that. Because I literally stopped paying attention.
Do you have any idea what the traffic count is on McKnight?
It's low because the road doesn't go through.
Yeah, there's nothing there.
Yeah, yep. It's low. Okay, so then Bavaria. Now, Bavaria isn't, the roadway itself isn't planned for improvement. There isn't an identified need to widen Bavaria, but we wanted them to look at pedestrian connectivity as part of the study. So specifically looking at trail locations. So they developed a concept for a trail on the west side, developed a concept for a trail on the east side. This will be actually coming to the city council, I think Ann said, on February 10th. So the Park and Rec Committee has reviewed this trail not only from here to 82nd Street, but all the way down to 86th Street. So
I watched it.
you'll get more detail on that coming up.
Kara, do you know anything about this trail on Bavaria actually connecting into it's actually supposed to connect into the Arboretum eventually, yes?
Yes, yep. So I'll not spend a lot of time on that since others will weigh in. Now posted on the website is the first glance of public feedback from the open houses. So we've gotten feedback. There were 115 plus people in attendance, but we gave everybody homework, so they had to go through and rate the concepts. So about 79 people responded at the meeting with their little sheets, and we got 50 plus comments on an online survey form of weighing in on the concepts. So what you're seeing here is how the public reacted to the different concepts. The star represents what the, which one had the highest technical score that you saw on those other graphics. So this, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this tonight, but this might be something you want to spend some time looking at relative to the concepts, and it's all posted on the project page. I do think we're going to be getting some more synthesized information from that public open house that I'll pass along to the city council once we have it. So moving forward, let's go back to the website. The technical advisory committee will be finalizing recommendations for those parts of the corridor. And the study group is beginning to work on Rolling Acres Road now and Highway 5 through downtown Victoria. So that's going to follow the same type of process where concepts will be developed. The technical advisory committee will review the concepts. They'll go to the stakeholder advisory committee. They'll go to a neighborhood meeting and then to a public open house to generate public input on the different concepts. City staff got their first glance of Rolling Acres Road and first round of discussion relative to Highway 5 through downtown. We think that those Rolling Acres Road neighborhood meeting will be in March, I think is what the current timeline is, and then downtown to follow after that. As I noted, we'll continue now to give, now that we're really moving into the part that's really in the core of Victoria, we'll be providing the council updates monthly at the second meeting of the month. We anticipate having a workshop in March where the design team will come in and present the concepts for Rolling Acres Road and Highway 5 to the council in a work session format, because I'm suspecting you'll maybe want to be able to dive into the details a little bit more.
Are they planning a 4-lane down through downtown?
That's yet to be determined. So they're just in the first phases of analyzing the data to see what the traffic demands are. But that's going to be a really important part of the study, is weighing in on, 2-lane, 4-lane through downtown. What does that footprint look like? What type of typical section? The timing of construction of all of these improvements is to be determined. So the implementation phase of the study will determine what the right priorities should be of what gets built first, what recommended funding packages make sense to pursue to fund it all. But certainly we're not talking about reconstructing all of these in the next 5 to 7 years. It would be cost prohibitive.
Probably not in the next 10 or 20.
Well, it
What?
just sounds like they're turning Highway
Would it be
5.
realistic to say that all of this would be done in 20, or should we say 30?
I don't want to presuppose what the implementation plan is going to conclude until we get into the details. But yeah, that's why it's going to be really important for members of the public and the city council to participate in these processes, to take a look at what that roadway looks like, particularly when you talk about it coming through downtown. Obviously that's a key concern about making sure we aren't cutting the community in half from
And
not being
turning
able to cross Highway
into
5.
Another freeway.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
Highway
and there
5,
isn't,
the study extends to west of the Dairy Queen or just by,
through the intersection
Okay.
of 11 by Dairy Queen. So the project page, you can Google Arboretum Area Transportation Plan and you'll get right to it. There's lots of information and then this link to get additional information. If members of the public are just starting to pay attention to this, you can sign up to receive project email updates, so you'll get directly notified of any open houses or as information becomes available. So certainly always recommend people to take advantage of that tool.
If you go to this website, how many pages?
There were a lot
Is
of
this
links.
50 or 100 or what is it?
There's a lot of documents on the additional information page because it has all of the behind the scenes work for environmental screening, traffic analysis, summary of input. So depending on how into the weeds a person wants to get, you could have lots of fun.
All right.
Some
Anything
of us
else?
more than others. That's it.
Council, anything else? Okay, item 7.3, discussion regarding Marsh Lake Road. Jeremy, you wanted to speak?
Jeremy Rock, 5925 Marsh Lake Road. So I just wanted to make a couple comments, so thank you for giving me a second. I won't take very long. When I originally saw Kara's agenda report estimate of 60 grand to 150 grand for this proposed shift, I kind of freaked out, to be honest, and I was like, geez, that sounds like a lot of money. Especially considering that there's really not a lot of value in the road base that's there other than its specific right-of-way location and the fact that it ties into everybody's driveways, because we're going to dig out 2 feet of it and replace it, with a base to make this 9-ton road. And I know this is just an order of magnitude question in terms of what's the estimated impact of this shift. But I wanted to meet with Kara, so we did talk today. We had a quick meeting so I could understand where that was coming from. And I do understand the basic common sense of I don't want to have this cost impact to the project that all the taxpayers are bearing just for this small change that affects 2 property owners. I would argue that it makes the road a little bit safer as well, but that's sort of irrelevant. Once I met with Kara, though, she made it clear to me that her estimate is based on what she says 3,700 to 8,800 yards of earthwork that would be required to move things around, and the majority of that cost sounds like comes from exporting that soil that gets cut off of the surface off-site. And then that kind of made sense to me because we do the same thing when we build homes in Minneapolis. If we have to move a truckload of dirt out because we're making a bigger foundation hole than what was there, it costs us a couple $100 a load just to take that and find somewhere else to dump it. So I kind of did my own simple math and it all made sense because just that 3,700 yards of soil is about $49,000 in just taking it and getting rid of it somewhere, up to if it was 8,800 yards, that's right at the 120 grand plus the contingency. So that all made sense. What we came to in our quick discussion was that if we can keep that soil on site so that we don't have to export it, then potentially we can mitigate most of this potential cost impact. And I am open to that. So I just want to make sure that council members all know we had a good discussion about we can put it right on my properties on either side of the road. We own that property. So on the north side of the road, there's plenty of space in the pasture area where we can say, hey, let's dump it here. We potentially could even use some of it up on the existing roadbed area that we would be evacuating in order to kind of berm it up and keep it right next to where we're cutting it. So we're not really moving it very far. And it might actually alleviate the concerns about being too close to the root zones of some of those historic old oak trees that are on the east part of my property on the south side of the road. So I'm sure that Kara will allude to the detail part of that, but I just want everybody to know that I am open to that and minimizing any cost. The cost will basically be invisible if we can keep that soil on site, if I understand correctly. And if we were to bid the project on the current roadbed and then ask somebody to bid it a second time by shifting, of course there's going to be an opportunity there for a contractor to say, oh, that's going to cost more somehow. But if we understand what our real costs are going in and we bid it that way, I think that it allows us to have the minimal cost for the road project and not really have any actual cost to the city in making that shift. So that's my 2 cents.
All right, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Kara?
Yeah, I think I'll just take a short little step back, big picture. So the area we're talking about is adjacent to these 2 homes here, shifting the road to the north, which would increase the front yard setback area for these houses, their proximity to the current traveled road. This is city property that was not yet deeded to us, but is getting deeded to the city. I just noticed it still lists the developer as the taxpayer, but this is city property we acquired as part of the Wasserman Lake development to expand the park and to accommodate increased right-of-way. So we would have land available should the council wish to shift to the north. And then Jeremy owns both sides of the road and has indicated that he would be willing to provide the additional right-of-way at no cost to the city. So just want to make sure I noted that out loud for the public. The council asked me to spend just a little bit of time to come up with a order of magnitude budgetary level cost associated with this shift. As noted in your council packet, what we came up with was something on the order of magnitude of $60,000 to $150,000. And the lower cost stems from not having to necessarily totally grade out that existing road. You could take the gravel off and still kind of leave the hump there versus grading it all out and making it, nice, smooth front yard. As Jeremy noted, a significant element of this cost is the cost to haul the material away. So we noted that we're looking at, as he noted, the order of magnitude of 3,700 cubic yards to 8,800 cubic yards of earthwork. A lot of that cut that would need to be, typically we would have to haul off site. So if there was an adjacent property owner that could take some of that fill, then you would still be dealing with the cost to physically move it from one point to the next with a dozer and, grade it out and then restore the area, but you don't, or stockpile it for future use. You don't have the trucking cost associated with hauling it away. So with a willing neighbor, you would theoretically be able to minimize that $60,000 down to some lower amount. We can't actually know the finer points of all of that unless we designed it. But that gives you a, ballpark of what we're talking about. And I think that's all I had to say, because Jeremy covered most of it.
What's the eastern border of what we're talking about?
So we were matching in kind of at the end of Vicky Leitner's property was where,
That's the western point?
yeah. Oh,
Where's the
you said
eastern point?
eastern. Right about here. So you see how this curve, how the road kind of curves in a little bit? Jeremy had provided you guys a sketch prior to the December meeting. That's what we based it off of, yes.
So you can see.
And I don't have that in the packet.
So whose land is that on the north side?
That's,
Here.
on the south side, I think it would probably protect them better.
So what's the cost to move the road?
Take a look at how that would be placed on his property to make sure that,
That eastern end of the property needs about 3,300 yards.
Okay.
Level that in.
And are there other areas along this roadway? Anywhere along this?
we will have access material standards, so there'll be some level of excavation that was already included in the project estimate. And typically,
How is this beneficial to the taxpayer? I also think it sets a dangerous precedent for us that if we move the road for a couple of residents and make the taxpayers pay, what do we do the next time somebody wants a road realigned near their property? And I just don't think, I don't think that'll happen. I think this road will get realigned when it gets converted, but then it'll be completely realigned and redone. So I think that's the time to do it. I don't think we take this piece here, because as soon as we do this, what about the people on the west end of the road? Down there by the pool, then are they gonna come in and ask us to move it again for them? I just don't think we can get into this.
Okay, so down at the other end of the road, we're gonna need to move that once the meat cutters, I thought we agreed that we wouldn't do anything until the meat cutters, and then we'd make arrangements that way. As far as,
Right, but my point.
moving this up, originally, the county wanted to move it up, so it might, because we're doing the 9-ton, it might be able to be used once they do add that in. And I'm worried about the trees, because if you've gone down through that road, those big trees that are on the south end, when you start digging that up, you could kill those trees. I'm just thinking about more of the future. because what if it doesn't get
you
redone
go.
in 20? Yeah, here.
Could I address your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
The two impacts that I would say are public impacts beyond these two property owners are, number one, we've said multiple times that we're trying to protect these historic trees and whatnot, and moving this road away from the root zone of those 150-year-old oak trees would be beneficial. And there are trees not only on the eastern end of my property, but in the front on the western end, as well as along the edge of Leitner's property to the west that are close to the road already. But more importantly, the curvature of the road is kind of odd, the way that it's developed over the years, and I'm sure that originally the dirt road was more straight than it is today. But it does actually curve back to the south when you're headed westbound over the creek and you come around that last curve heading west. It curves back to the south towards my residence. And I don't know that it ever intentionally did that. It's just kind of developed that way over the years. This area, say 2/3 of the way to the eastern side of my residence property, is where cars slide off the road all the time because they're coming off of that curve and they continue kind of straight instead of curving back to the south. So just from a layman's perspective, this is the area where people end up leaving the road, and if we were to straighten it by shifting a little bit, that would be the only traffic safety aspect of that part of the road that I could say is in the public interest, because it does kind of what the county was trying to do by easing that curve and continuing you straight down the road rather than swerving back into the south.
All right, so that's the first I've heard of that. I've never heard of carts going off the road there, Kara?
Well, you could drive down there today. There's big marks from the two cars that went off together 5 nights ago and had to be pulled out. Both of them almost hit my fence on the north side.
Was that a snow event or something?
Nope, it was just the road is slippery and they were probably going a couple mile an hour too fast.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Council, do we have any motions here? Do we need a motion? What do you need here?
So the city council already authorized final design based on keeping the road on its current alignment vertically and horizontally. If you want us to proceed with shifting the road here, I would need council direction to do that.
All right, council, does anybody want to make a motion?
I have a question. Has design work on this started?
Yes.
Mayor.
Council authorized final design at the December council meeting. They haven't gotten too far because they don't want to get too far with this middle section possibly moving. But we've got to get moving if we want to be bidding and constructing. It's already almost February.
All right, we want to get this road built in 2020.
Yes.
Right? All right, last call. Council, does anybody want to make a motion?
Do we have legal exposure from precedent if we were to fund the realignment of this road in these circumstances? Can somebody come after us on other parts of the road?
Yeah, so Mayor and Council, the question I was going to ask was, is the proposed realignment within the existing right-of-way, or is there a little bit of right-of-way that needs to be acquired to do this? That was sort of my
Right-of-way would
staff
need to
level
be
question.
acquired from Jeremy, which he's indicated he would provide at no cost.
Sure, right. And so the only technical point on that would be that you'd have to work some sort of minor subdivision to slide off that little piece of right-of-way, and so there's a little bit of legal title work that would have to be done to accomplish that. So that would be the subject of a motion. If somebody was going to make a motion, would be both to direct Kara to revise the design plans, but also to acquire the right-of-way that's required, even if it's at no cost. And then with respect to legal liability, no, I think what you're driving at is does this create or potentially create a precedent? Can others demand this, ask for this? My answer to that is always going to be no. You don't set precedents with road design decisions or zoning decisions. That said, yes, there is a legal liability issue if you can't find there to be a public safety or a public interest reason for this. You can't spend public money unless there's found to be a public purpose for spending that money. So I think you need to conclude that there's a public purpose for the expenditure. You can't do it just to benefit the requesting property owner.
All right, thank you.
So I guess the question is do we find that it would be in the public interest to move the road over to make the road straighter and protect the trees on the south end. Is that worth?
Well, those trees have been there as long as Marsh Lake Road has been there. I
Right.
don't I think we have to,
Traffic-wise, I think we'd need a traffic study. An expert would have to tell us that there's a safety issue here that could be remedied. I don't think we have the capability to say we see a traffic issue, safety issue, and we know how to remedy it. We need an expert opinion.
Well, and we've decided that we're not going to make the safety improvements by leveling out those hills or straightening out those curves.
correct. All right, so,
And I appreciate Mr. Rock coming forward and offering a land swap, but I think it would be a stretch to say this is for the public benefit.
correct. So last call. Does any council member want to make a motion? Going once, twice? Okay, we're going to keep it as is then.
Sorry.
Next item, Kara, this is also yours. You're hot on the docket tonight. 7.4, approve joint powers agreement with the city of Chanhassen for Minnewaska Parkway improvements. Kara, go ahead.
Certainly. Mayor and members of the city council, back in July already, the city council approved a resolution ordering the preparation of a feasibility study for Marsh Lake Road. So just stepping back by way of background, the city of Chanhassen is planning to improve Minnewaska Parkway from Highway 7 to Highway 5, actually not quite to Highway 5. A section of Minnewaska was improved with the 2012 Highway 5 project, so it doesn't need to be reconstructed or reclaimed and improved all the way back to the intersection. It stops right about here. But this section, this is the city limit line for the city of Victoria, so this area is within the city of Victoria. So initially, we were asked to join in and participate in their project so that we could get our segment rebuilt at the same time they were rebuilding their whole segment. Under our assessment policy, we would assess benefiting property owners for that work. So we got kicked off on the feasibility study. Meanwhile, the city of Chanhassen was doing some additional research and confirmed. I had historically heard rumors of this, but never had anybody find at Chanhassen the document, but confirmed that the right-of-way of Minnewaska Parkway was ceded to Chanhassen by Victoria in 1992 by a decision of the state of Minnesota's municipal board. And my understanding why that occurred was because they were using state aid funds to reconstruct Minnewaska Parkway back at that time, and they would have needed to have control over the whole right-of-way. So the cities must have decided to give them the right-of-way. So the good news is it's not our financial responsibility to improve that road. But there are 2 Victoria residents who live adjacent to the road. So the city of Chanhassen prepared a joint powers agreement that would provide for the ability to assess the 2 property owners within the city of Chanhassen. The proposed assessment amount within the city of Victoria. The proposed assessment amount is $4,460, which is, pretty consistent with what we've been seeing for assessment amounts for reclaim type projects of the same scale. The joint powers agreement provides for our residents to participate in their public process, just the same as a Chanhassen resident would be permitted to. So they've been notifying and inviting those residents along the way as part of the process. So this is simply to approve the joint powers agreement, and we no longer have to complete that feasibility study or fund the actual cost of the improvement, so.
All right, thank you. So what do you need? You just need us to approve the JPA tonight?
Correct.
All right. Council, comments, questions?
So they're being assessed by Chanhassen?
Yeah, Bob, do you want to walk through how that
Yeah.
technically works?
Mayor and council, the technical answer is no. They'd be assessed by Victoria. Chanhassen would take on the obligation to have done the feasibility work, part of the 429 assessment process. The first thing you do is a feasibility report. As I understand that, they've taken on that obligation and done that work. They have to design the work, they have to do the construction of this segment of road along with all the other segments of road and calculate the appropriate assessment amount. But literally speaking, what we're agreeing to in this agreement is this city, Victoria, would do the assessment of its residents. In turn, we're agreeing to pay over to our neighboring city the amount that we collect in those assessments as they come in. So we would do the assessing based on all the work they've done, they, Chanhassen. We would assess our residents and then simply remit the amount we receive from our residents back to Chanhassen.
Since they're paying for the road. Okay, thank you. Comments, questions? If not, can I get a motion, please?
I make a motion that we approve the joint powers agreement with the city of Chanhassen for Minnewaska Parkway improvements.
Thank you. Second, please.
Second motion.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Kara. No, roundtable. Anything? Dana? Okay, reports. Bob?
Super gratuitous, Mayor, but a meeting with your legislators tonight, I just want to say I've not seen that in any other cities, and that was really neat to see, and I think that's probably an effective way to advance your legislative priorities. And other than that, I don't have any comments or any report.
Thank you. Dana?
Nothing from staff, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Council members? Seeing no hands, can I get a motion to adjourn then, please?
So moved.
Second, please.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion, we are adjourned.